welcome to our video, Not Just Blue and Pink. Today we will be discussing the many associations of sex and gender with you in hopes that the information presented in this video will help educate and clear up any confusing issues about these topics.
Through this video, we will talk about sex and gender in science, gender in society, gender symbols, color symbolism, and sexual orientation symbols, as well as sex and gender in activism.
We would like to let you know that this video is the result of research into these specific topics, and we are by no means experts.
If you want to explore more information on the topics presented, our full list of resources are in the description box below. If you want to continue the conversation, please check out our Twitter account and use the hashtag #NotJustBlueAndPink.
One of the first arguments people make when discussing sex and gender is that scientific evidence reinforces the gender binary. They often point out that there are two somatic chromosomal variations, XX for female and XY for male. The same goes for genitalia. People will always argue that humans are born with one of two types of genitalia, breasts and a vagina for females, and a penis and testes for males. However, this is not quite the case. Many people are unaware of the variety of different somatic chromosomes people can be born with, and how that may affect the genitalia an individual can be born with. Unless someone studies biology or has experienced themselves or a close loved one living with what is officially called a sex chromosome abnormality or a disorder of sex development, otherwise known as DSD, one will likely have never heard of them. Many people who have experienced these medical conditions are unaware that they are affected, and many more people have these conditions than you may think. Let's go over a few instances where an individual may be born outside of the sex and gender binary. First, let's talk about Turner syndrome, or monosomy. Individuals with Turner syndrome are phenotypically female, and they have one X chromosome and no other chromosomes. This is a common chromosomal anomaly, but only 1 in 40 zygotes develop to term. 1 in 3,000 infants are born with Turner syndrome. Those affected will be sterile, lack female secondary characteristics such as widened hips and breasts, and may be short in stature. On the other hand, 1 in 1,000 infants are born with polysomy, that is phenotypically female. Polysomy means that there are 3 or more sex chromosomes, so for instance 47XXX. Individuals born with this develop sexual characteristics normally, are fertile, but may be taller or more slender than individuals born with the common XY or XX chromosomes. Polysomy with a male phenotype is called Klinefelter syndrome, and 1 in 600 infants are born with it. This means that there is an extra copy of the X chromosome. An example, 47XXY. There is hardly any difference between a child affected with Klinefelter syndrome and a typical male child before puberty. However, the affected child will notice that they are excessive in height, and they may experience hypogonadism, which means smaller genitalia. Once of reproductive age, the individual may be treated for infertility since many affected are sterile. Another male phenotypic form of polysomy is when there is an extra copy of the Y chromosome. So, for instance, 47XYY. 1 in 1,000 individuals are born this way. And many individuals with this form of polysomy that choose to live as male lead a normal life. They are typically taller and are often in the 90th percentile for height. Most are sterile and they may have increased acne due to higher levels of testosterone. Most individuals go their whole lives without being diagnosed. However, due to routine testing now done on embryos and some behavioral problems that may occur, there has been an increase in diagnosis. One of the most known forms of DSD is hermaphroditism. This is when an individual is born with and develops functional ovarian and testicular tissue. As long as the individual has fully functioning reproductive tissue, they can theoretically reproduce. There is no known statistic for the frequency of hermaphroditism, but some scientists suggest that it is more prevalent in some regions than others. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia can affect both 46XX and 46XY individuals and is an inherited autosomal recessive condition. This disorder, also known as adrenogenital syndrome, results from a genetically caused deficiency of cortisol, a steroid hormone produced by the adrenal cortex. Infants may be born with ambiguous genitalia, especially if left untreated. Into adulthood, genetically female individuals may experience enlarged clitoral tissue, hirsutism, which is the development of hair in regions that are typically associated with 46XY individuals, and typical male behavior patterns. This condition is more rare than most and occurs in 1 out of 5,000 births. Finally, we are going to talk about androgen insensitivity syndrome. a condition where individuals are born genetically male, 46XY, but are phenotypically female. It is an X-linked recessive trait, and the tissues of the affected individual do not respond to testosterone, but do respond to estrogen. There are complete and partial types of this syndrome, where partial androgen insensitivity syndrome individuals may develop ambiguous genitalia instead of completely female genitalia. There are other sex chromosomal abnormalities and DSDs that we do not have time to talk about today, but I hope you are getting the point. Many individuals on this planet don't fall into the binary category of sex, and there are many ways this can happen, both genetically and phenotypically. Despite what our social institutions say, developmental biologists state that a strict belief in sexual dimorphism is incorrect and should be a bimodal continuum, which looks like two bell curves on a graph that intersect in the middle to make room for intersexuality. All this was just talking about sex, but what about gender? Let me pass it over to my friend Monica so that she can begin to explore gender with you.
What is gender, and how have we come to understand it? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines gender as the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits typically associated with one sex. But what is sex? Sex is defined as either two major forms of individuals that occur in many species and are distinguished respectively as female or male, especially on the basis of their reproductive organs. So what do these definitions mean? How and why have we come to understand gender and sex this way? Well, during the 1800s, people were categorized as male or female based on their vital heat. If you had a significant amount of vital heat, then you were categorized as male. If you had less vital heat, you were categorized as female. This categorization depended on factors such as sex. If men had sex with other men, then they had more vital heat and they could obtain their maleness. Sex also correlated with gender, and they only had one type of genitalia, which was the penis. But there were two different forms, the inner penis and the outer penis. According to philosopher Thomas Lacker, these distinct ways of categorizing people were influenced by different societal factors, such as evangelical religion, Enlightenment political theory, post-revolutionary conservatism, the rise of a free market economy in services or commodities, and many other societal factors. As summed up by Lacker, there's biology of hierarchy, in which there is only one sex, a biology of incommensurability between two sexes, and the claim that there is no public relevant sexual difference at all, or no sex, have constrained the interpretation of bodies and the strategies of sexual politics for some thousand years. So humans have used biology and shifted it to interpret and justify how we view sex and gender. It's nothing more than a social construct that has been shaped by society, and we've attempted to justify it through science, and it continues to shape the way we view gender and sex. Lacker brings up an important point that constructions were not the consequence of scientific change, but rather of an epistemological and social-political revolution. Social and political influence heavily affects the way gender and sex gets defined, and this continues today. Race and class also affect the way gender gets defined. Race and class also affects the way that gender gets mapped onto certain people. There's more about this located in the description box below. So gender is a social construct, and it's not binary, but it's a spectrum that looks different on everybody. I challenge you to critically think about gender and sex. Think about what societal factors influence these definitions and why. There are also many symbols that influence the way that we view gender. My friend Sam will talk about that next.
There are many symbols that represent genders. However, I will only be talking about the ones that are most prominent in today's society. Here are two symbols that are widely used. I'm sure you're familiar with them. The symbol on the left represents male, and the symbol on the right represents female. In 1751, Carl Linnaeus used these two symbols to act as shorthand notation for males and females in biology. Because of his use of these symbols, their use spread to alchemy, botany, and chemistry. Linnaeus helped to popularize these symbols, and as a result, we still use them today. Also in 1751, Linnaeus also used this symbol to represent hybrids and hermaphrodites in botany. The top crescent moon of the symbol represents the masculine, and the bottom cross represents the feminine. The circle in the center between the masculine and the feminine represents the individual. In this symbol, there is a balance of both masculine and feminine traits. Many historians postulate that these three symbols were derived from the Greek names for the planets and gods. As seen in this image, These are the derivations of planetary symbols from ancient Greek letters for the names of their deities and their Roman counterparts: Thoros or Mars, Phosphorus or Venus, and Stobon or Mercury. This symbol for female is sometimes referred to as the mirror of Venus after the Roman goddess, and this symbol for male is sometimes referred to as the shield and spear of Mars after the Roman god of war. Since this symbol's first appearance in 1751, representing hybrids and hermaphrodites, it has developed many more meanings. For example, this symbol has represented a virgin female, intersex individuals, and transgender people. Moving on from binary representations of gender, we explore the many other symbols for gender. This symbol represents both male and female. In the 1970s, this symbol was used to represent the common goals of lesbians and gays. Today, this symbol is mostly used to represent an intersex or transgender person. It can also be used to represent a heterosexual who is aware of the differences and diversity of men and women. In the 1990s, Holly Boswell and Wendy Parker came up with this symbol to represent transgender or non-binary gender identity. These two transgender symbols are general symbols used by or for people who identify as transgender. There are also more specific transgender symbols, such as these, which represent transfeminine and transmasculine, respectively. These symbols represent third gender or androgyny. This symbol represents neutral or no gender. This symbol also represents neutral gender, but is also used to represent genderless, sexless, or asexual gender. These four symbols are also used to represent non-binary genders. There are also symbols for people who only half identify as a certain gender. The one on the left is used to represent demi-boy gender, or people who identify as partially male, and the one on the right is used to represent demi-girl gender, or people who identify as partially female. Demigender is often used as an umbrella term for non-binary identities and can be used with a wide range of genders. In addition to gender symbols, there is color symbolism. Color symbolism for this video is defined as specific colors that are associated with a specific gender. Early cultures, such as Egyptians and the Greeks, have used colors to indicate specific genders. The color white in these cultures was associated with females, and the color black was associated with males. However, in Chinese culture, these representations were the opposite. White was associated with males and black with females. This color representation can be seen in Chinese culture in the easy-to-recognize yin and yang symbol. Centuries later, these color associations changed. Starting in the 5th century, white was seen as a gender-neutral color and became the color of choice for both male and female infants. This trend lasted until the late 1800s. During this time, it was seen as inappropriate for young children to have gendered clothing because their innocence was one of their greatest charms. In the Victorian era, if you saw a child dressed in white, they were simply a baby. Because both male and female babies were dressed the same, it was impossible for their genders to be discerned. In fact, in 1905, a baby food company held a sex-guessing contest that featured 20 babies, all dressed in white. The baby food company offered a reward to whoever could accurately guess the sex of all 20 babies. No one guessed all 20 correctly. In fact, the highest guess was 18 correct. Pastel colors for infants arrived in the mid-19th century, and in 1896, two new colors had become popular for infants, blue and pink. However, these colors were not associated with a specific gender. Rather, they were associated with the hair color of the infants. Brunettes wore blue and blondes wore pink. Parents during this time felt that these colors were very becoming for their infants, regardless if they were sexually male or female. These color associations changed in the early 1900s when prenatal testing was developed. By 1918, the generally accepted rule was pink for boys and blue for girls. This is because pink was seen as a stronger color and thus more suitable for the boy, while blue was seen as a more delicate and dainty color, which was better suited for the girl. Over the next couple of years, many people had differing opinions about which gender should wear which color. In 1927, gender identification became a major issue, but many people and stores disagreed on who should wear pink and who should wear blue. In response to this dilemma, Time magazine published a table that showed surveys of infants' department in major department stores. By the 1950s, this debate was settled and it was decided that girls should wear pink and boys should wear blue. This changed in the late 1960s when baby boomers became parents and wanted non-sexist or gender-free child rearing. This unisex era, as it was called, lasted from 1965 to 1985. Feminist parents rejected pink for their daughters, opting for unfeminine or masculine looks instead. During this time, blue was still used for boys and sometimes for girls. The unisex era confirmed that pink was an undeniable symbol of femininity and reinforced the idea in society that pink is for girls. Today, we still use blue to represent boys and pink for girls. To bring together gender symbols and color symbolism, I will next talk about sexual orientation symbols. Some symbols that represent sexual orientations are these. The first symbol represents heterosexuality. The second symbol represents male homosexuality or gays. And the third symbol represents female homosexuality or lesbians. In the 1970s, when these symbols were created, this symbol sometimes represented sisterhood, while this symbol represented lesbianism. People can also identify as bisexuals, pansexuals, asexuals, and many more. On the outside, people may see two heterosexuals, two gay men, or two lesbians. But these couples can identify as many different combinations. There is a growing trend of associating girls with pink and boys with blue. Gender reveals, anyone? But there is also concern that very young children will adopt gender expressions that are adult and sexual in nature. By limiting young children to certain toys, clothes, colors, and more, according to their gender, we as a society are limiting the mindset of future generations. Why do we even need gender labels and sexual orientation labels? Let me pass it off to my friend Janice, who will talk about gender and sex and activism.
In this section of the video, we're going to talk about how the roles of activism plays in the LGBT community. Disclaimer, this is not a full list of events or activities associated with the LGBT community. These are just some highlight events that I found play a major part in the progression of this community, as well as the turning points that have altered the way gender is viewed in the LGBT community. I want to start by setting up a framework for you all to understand what goes into a person's everyday life. The Genderbread Person model will help us talk about the role gender plays and how activism has evolved over decades. Genderbread Person is broken down into 4 categories. In this section, I will focus on gender expression. Gender expression is how you represent yourself in your everyday life, from the clothes that you choose to wear, from your behaviors, how you interact with others. This can translate easily into the forms of activism you're involved in because your gender is your major influencer. If you would like more information about the other categories, I will have a webpage linked down below in the description box. Moving into the timeline of the LGBT community, actions I found were in response to the Stonewall Inn arrest in 1969. The Stonewall Inn happened June 28th, 1969. It was where police had a warrant and they made a ton of arrests of community members in the LGBT community. One woman was struck over her head and called out to the crowd for help. In that instant, they responded by throwing pennies and other objects at the police officers. This, I feel, was a major turning point for the LGBT community in terms of speaking out and making their presence widely known. Next, we have the Pride flag. The first striped flag stitched and designed by Gilbert Baker. He was an artist and a gay rights activist. The original version of the flag had 8 colors that stood for healing, sunlight, nature, and spirit. The creative symbols that acts as a form of activism. Human Rights Campaign was founded by Steve and Dean in 1980 as one of the first gay and lesbian political action committees in the United States. Following that, more widely known today, is the Pride Parades. The first one was held in New York in 1970. Today, the Pride Parades have blossomed into huge festivals that bring people from the LGBT community from all over the world. Another political victory was by Harvey Milk, who campaigned on a pro-gay rights platform in 1978. He became the first openly gay elected politician in the office of California. Next, we have June Pride Month. It is recognized in reaction to the horrible incidents in the Stonewall Inn arrests. This was recognized by President Bill Clinton in 1999. These events show the courage and determination it takes to achieve such change. Organizations you can check out for further help to create change in the LGBT community will be linked below. These are ways for you to get involved and potentially further the fight for their rights.
Now that we've discussed the different factors that influence and reinforce gender constructs, here are a variety of ways that you can disrupt this narrative. Be aware of your use of language. For example, don't assume one's gender. Instead, use gender-neutral pronouns like they, them, theirs.
This also applies to when you're addressing a crowd. Instead of saying ladies and gentlemen, say things like everyone, folks, people, etc. Also, have conversations about this with your friends and family if they're being transphobic. Address it and tell them why that's not okay. And also, educate your friends and family on why gender is a spectrum and not a binary. There are many ways to take action, so do it and educate yourself and others. Another form of inclusive language that you can use is perhaps using the term SAGA, sex and gender acceptance. This is a way of being inclusive of all forms of sex and gender orientations. Although the LGBT acronym is inclusive, it still categorizes people and can confine them into identity that they might not completely agree with. Sex and gender acceptance, on the other hand, covers the whole range, plus the word saga is a pretty cool term to use. If you'd like to continue this conversation, as we said in the introduction, please check out our Twitter account and use the hashtag #NotJustBlueAndPink. Thank you so much for watching.